Mist drifted through the mountain village of Ekizan province like a living memory, curling around ancient cedar trees whose roots had watched generations rise and fall. At dawn, the village was neither asleep nor awake, suspended in a fragile silence broken only by the soft creak of wood and the distant cry of birds. From two neighboring houses stepped two boys, both 15, both carrying wooden swords that felt heavier than they looked. Their breaths formed pale clouds in the cold air, fading as quickly as they appeared. Kenta and Takahashi had grown up side by side, shared the same dirt paths, the same meals, the same childish dreams of greatness whispered under starlit skies. To anyone watching, they were indistinguishable: same age, same strength, same opportunity, same hunger for a future larger than the village they were born into. Today, however, something invisible began to separate them. They walked together toward the dojo, a structure older than memory itself, its wooden beams darkened by time and discipline. The path was slick with morning dew, stones cold beneath their sandals. Neither spoke much, but their thoughts were loud. Kenta's mind raced ahead, imagining the stories that would one day be told about him, the respect he would earn, the pride in his parents' eyes. He felt fire in his chest, a restless certainty that he was destined for something exceptional. Takahashi walked quietly beside him, eyes forward, attention fixed on each step, each breath. He did not imagine the future. He felt only the present moment, the weight of the sword, the chill of the air, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. The dojo door stood closed, as it had for centuries, guarding the trials within. When it opened, it did so without sound. Yamamoto-sensei stood framed in the doorway, tall and unmoving, as if carved from the mountain itself. His face bore a deep scar along his right cheek, pale against weathered skin, a reminder of a battle no one dared to ask about. His eyes were dark, unsettlingly calm, the kind that seemed to look past flesh and bone into the shape of a man's spirit. He did not greet them. He did not ask their names. He simply studied them in silence, a silence so heavy it pressed against their chests. In that moment, the boys felt something unfamiliar, the sensation of being seen. Not as children. Not as students. But as raw potential, unshaped, undisciplined, dangerous in its uncertainty. Yamamoto-sensei's gaze lingered longer than comfort allowed. It was as if he were watching two rivers just before they diverged, knowing that once separated, they would never meet again. Finally, he spoke a single word, low and final. Enter. Inside, the dojo was stripped of decoration. The wooden floor was smooth from thousands of footsteps, each one belonging to someone who had once stood where they now stood, full of hope and fear. The walls were bare except for a single hanging scroll, marked with one bold character painted in black ink. Beginning, or end, it was impossible to tell. The air smelled of old wood and discipline. Kenta felt excitement surge through him, a thrill at being here, at finally starting what he believed would be an extraordinary journey. Takahashi felt something quieter, heavier, a sense that this place would demand more than ambition, more than desire, more than words. As the door closed behind them, neither boy understood the truth of that moment. That nothing dramatic needed to happen for their lives to change. That destiny does not announce itself with thunder. It begins softly, invisibly, with a single step taken fully, or delayed. The days that followed blended together so perfectly that even memory struggled to separate one from another. Morning after morning, Kenta and Takahashi arrived at the dojo before the sun fully claimed the sky. They bowed at the threshold, stepped onto the worn wooden floor, and began again. Yamamoto-sensei spoke little. Instruction came not through long explanations, but through demonstration, correction, and silence. The boys learned to swing their wooden swords until their arms trembled, to hold stances until their legs burned, to breathe through pain without complaint. Meals were small and simple. Sleep came on thin mats that offered no comfort, only rest. The body was trained to obey, not to negotiate. At first, the two boys appeared identical in effort. Both listened closely. Both repeated the movements as instructed. Both endured the soreness that followed each session. To an untrained eye, there was no difference between them. But beneath the surface, something subtle began to form, so quiet that even the boys themselves were unaware of it. The dojo was not merely shaping muscle and technique, it was revealing character. Kenta talked. Not during training, Yamamoto-sensei would never allow that, but afterward, when the tension of discipline loosened its grip. He spoke with excitement, with confidence, with visions of the warrior he was becoming. He told the others how seriously he took the path, how deeply he respected the way of the samurai. He spoke of meditation he would do late into the night, of extra practice he planned to add at dawn, of how quickly he intended to surpass expectations. His words were passionate, convincing even. Listening to him, one could almost believe that mastery was already his. Takahashi said very little. When training ended and the others gathered to talk, he sat apart, carefully wiping down his wooden sword with slow, deliberate movements. Each stroke of the cloth was precise, unhurried, as if the act itself were part of training. When his blade was clean, he placed it beside him, straightened his mat, and prepared for rest. While others discussed techniques and futures, he slept. Not from lack of ambition, but from respect for the next day. Yamamoto-sensei noticed. He noticed everything. The way Kenta's enthusiasm flared bright but scattered, like a fire fed with too much wind. The way Takahashi's presence was steady, contained, almost invisible. The teacher did not praise one or correct the other. He understood that early judgment would interfere with the lesson life itself needed to teach. Weeks passed. The pain became familiar. Muscles hardened. Hands grew calloused. Yet the mental weight of training grew heavier than the physical. It was easy to swing a sword when others watched. Harder to rise when no one called your name. Harder still to maintain effort when progress was slow and invisible. This was where most students faltered, not in strength, but in consistency. Kenta's words grew more elaborate. Each evening, he outlined plans for improvement with greater precision. Tomorrow, he would wake earlier. Next week, he would double his training. In a month, the results would be undeniable. His confidence never faded, if anything, it grew stronger with each declaration. The plans gave him a sense of control, a feeling of movement even when his body remained still. Takahashi made no plans aloud. His discipline was quiet, internal. He followed the same routine every day, unremarkable and unchanging. Wake. Train. Eat. Rest. Repeat. There was no drama in it, no surge of motivation to celebrate, no despair to announce. Only the acceptance that this was the path, and paths are walked one step at a time. To the others, Kenta seemed alive with purpose, while Takahashi appeared almost dull in comparison. But Yamamoto-sensei understood a truth most never learn: noise often hides emptiness, and silence often hides strength. What mattered was not how intensely one spoke about the future, but how faithfully one showed up to the present. Winter arrived without ceremony. One night the wind sharpened, and by morning the mountains were wrapped in white silence. Snow pressed down on rooftops, on tree branches, on the narrow paths that led from the village to the dojo. Breath turned visible the moment it left the lungs. It was in this season that Yamamoto-sensei spoke words that carried more weight than they seemed at first. At the end of training one evening, his voice cut cleanly through the cold air. Tomorrow, before dawn, he said, the real training begins. Do not be late. He said nothing more. No explanation. No warning. The words settled into the boys like stones dropped into still water. That night, Kenta lay awake staring into darkness. His body was tired, but his mind raced with energy. Tomorrow replayed itself again and again behind his eyes. He imagined waking before everyone else, stepping into the snow while the world still slept, arriving first at the dojo. He imagined Yamamoto-sensei noticing. Imagined approval, recognition, the quiet acknowledgement that he was different from the others. His thoughts leapt ahead, weeks, months, years, toward a future where his name carried weight, where stories were told about his discipline and dedication. The excitement felt productive, as if thinking alone were already a kind of effort. Takahashi's night was different. He too remained awake for a while, but his thoughts were practical, grounded. He checked the placement of his sandals by the door. Folded his training clothes and laid them where his hands would find them without searching. He traced the path from his home to the dojo in his mind, noting where snow might drift, where stones might hide beneath white cover. When everything was prepared, he lay down and closed his eyes. Sleep came quickly, not because he lacked anticipation, but because preparation had replaced it. Before dawn, the world was heavy with darkness. Snow fell in slow, soundless sheets, muting every edge. Takahashi's eyes opened without alarm. He did not know the time, but his body recognized it. He rose, dressed quietly, and stepped outside. Cold bit at his skin, sharp and immediate. Each step toward the dojo left a clean imprint in the untouched snow. There was no audience, no witness. Only the rhythm of breath and movement. Inside the dojo, a single candle burned. Yamamoto-sensei sat motionless, eyes closed, as if carved from the same wood as the floor beneath him. The door slid open softly. Takahashi entered, bowed, and knelt without a word. The teacher opened his eyes, met the boy's gaze for a brief moment, and nodded once. No praise. No smile. Just acknowledgement. In that nod lived a quiet understanding. Minutes passed. Then more. The candle flame flickered. Finally, the door burst open. Kenta stumbled inside, breath ragged, hair damp with melted snow, robe tied in haste. Words spilled from him immediately. Apologies, explanations, promises layered one over another. He spoke of a restless night, of responsibilities at home, of intentions stronger than circumstances. Yamamoto-sensei listened without interruption. When Kenta finished, the silence felt heavier than any rebuke. The teacher's voice was calm when he spoke. Takahashi also has a home, he said. He also has family. Kenta nodded quickly, relieved to agree. Yes, teacher. Yamamoto-sensei's gaze did not soften. And yet, he is here. The words landed simply, without accusation. That made them impossible to deflect. Training began. The snow outside continued to fall, indifferent to excuses, unmoved by intentions. As the days that followed unfolded, the pattern revealed itself again and again. Each time the cold deepened, each time fatigue whispered, each time comfort beckoned, Takahashi arrived quietly. And each time, Kenta arrived later, or not at all, with reasons that were always understandable, always human, always convincing. Yamamoto-sensei said nothing. He did not need to. The lesson was already underway, written not in words, but in repeated choices. Winter was not testing strength. It was exposing priorities. What began as an exception soon hardened into routine. Kenta's absences were never dramatic, never careless. Each one arrived wrapped in explanation, delivered with sincerity and regret. One morning it was work needed at home. Another, a younger sibling's illness. Some days his own body felt unwell, heavy and resistant. Other days exhaustion itself became the justification. None of these reasons were lies. Each one was real. Each one could have happened to anyone. That was what made them so dangerous. They blended into life so naturally that even Kenta believed they excused him. Takahashi had the same life. He lived in the same village, under the same weather, with the same obligations. His mother, too, fell ill at times. His body, too, felt pain. His mind, too, whispered for rest when dawn arrived. The difference was not circumstance but response. When reasons appeared, he acknowledged them and then stepped past them. He did not argue with his discomfort. He did not negotiate with his mood. He simply rose, dressed, and went. Kenta began to collect phrases the way others collected tools. They came easily to his tongue and felt harmless when spoken aloud. Starting Monday, I will train seriously. Tomorrow I will make up for today. I don't feel like training now, it wouldn't be effective. Everyone needs rest. Others don't train every day either. Each phrase soothed the immediate discomfort of effort. Each one postponed the confrontation with action. And each one carried the same silent decision within it, not today. Yamamoto-sensei observed without interference. He had seen this pattern before, many times, across many years. He knew that discipline cannot be explained into existence. It must be chosen repeatedly, without applause. The teacher watched Takahashi's movements grow more economical, less wasteful. Strength accumulated quietly, without announcement. Breath slowed. Posture stabilized. There was no sudden transformation, only steady progression that could be felt more than seen. Kenta, by contrast, remained suspended in potential. His enthusiasm never dimmed. His confidence never collapsed. He continued to believe deeply in the man he would become. But belief alone did not thicken muscle or sharpen reflex. His body told a story his words could not override. It remained largely unchanged, obedient only to the effort actually applied to it. Muscles, like truth, do not respond to intention. They respond to repetition. One evening, Yamamoto-sensei called Takahashi aside after training. The boy knelt, head lowered. "Why do you come every day?" the teacher asked. The question seemed to surprise him. He thought for a long moment, searching not for a clever answer, but for an honest one. "Because you said to come," he replied at last. The teacher's gaze sharpened. "And when it is cold? When your body hurts? When your mind says no?" Takahashi hesitated, then spoke softly. "Because today is today. Tomorrow is tomorrow. But today is the only thing I have." Yamamoto-sensei closed his eyes briefly. In that moment, he understood. Not as hope, but as certainty. This boy would endure. He would not rely on motivation or inspiration. He would survive the long road because he did not argue with it. Later, the teacher called Kenta forward. The boy entered with his familiar confidence, ready to explain himself if needed. The question was direct. "Why do you not come regularly?" Kenta answered immediately, listing responsibilities, obstacles, unpredictability. Life did not always allow consistency, he said. He did not choose absence. It simply happened. Yamamoto-sensei raised his hand. Silence fell. "There is a word in our language," he said slowly, "that has destroyed more warriors than any enemy." He let the words hang. Tomorrow. He explained that tomorrow was not time, but illusion. A promise that relieved guilt without demanding action. A story the mind tells to escape the present. A warrior lives today, he continued. He trains today. He dies today if necessary. Tomorrow does not belong to him. The words struck Kenta like cold water. He felt them, but feeling was not enough. Understanding does not equal transformation. As he left the dojo that night, he told himself that tomorrow he would change. And in that thought, the trap quietly closed again. The months that followed widened the distance between the two boys in ways that could no longer be ignored. Time, indifferent and precise, began recording their choices in flesh and movement. Takahashi's body adapted to the demands placed upon it. His shoulders broadened, not dramatically, but unmistakably. His stance became grounded, his balance instinctive. Movements that once required conscious effort now flowed with an ease born only from repetition. Strike followed strike, day after day, until action and intention merged into a single motion. There was no pride in this transformation, no announcement. It simply happened, quietly, the way mountains are shaped by weather. Kenta remained unchanged. His enthusiasm still burned hot, his words still carried conviction, but his body did not follow his narrative. He trained when conditions were favorable, when the weather was mild, when fatigue was low, when the mood felt right. On those days, he worked hard and left satisfied, convinced he had proven something to himself. Yet the gaps between those days stretched wider. Each gap softened discipline just enough to require willpower again the next time. And willpower, unlike routine, always demanded negotiation. Kenta became deeply familiar with the internal debate that preceded effort. The mind weighed comfort against obligation, rest against resistance. Sometimes obligation won, but often comfort made a persuasive case. There was always tomorrow. Always another cycle in which to begin properly. This belief allowed him to maintain a positive image of himself without confronting the cost of delay. He was still a warrior in his imagination, still progressing in theory. Yamamoto-sensei watched the divergence with the patience of someone who understood time better than people. He did not intervene, because intervention would have weakened the lesson. Takahashi was no longer training to become disciplined, discipline had become the condition under which he existed. Weather did not alter his routine. Pain did not redefine his priorities. Even fever did not excuse absence, only moderation. He trained lightly when necessary, but he trained. Continuity mattered more than intensity. For Takahashi, training was no longer something to prepare for mentally. It did not require motivation. It was as ordinary as breathing. He did not feel heroic for rising early or enduring discomfort. He felt aligned. The body accepted strain because it had been taught that strain did not equal danger. Each morning reinforced that understanding. Kenta, by contrast, lived in cycles of anticipation and disappointment. After each missed session, he felt a quiet discomfort, quickly neutralized by explanation. After each good session, he felt relief, even pride. But relief is not progress, and pride is not structure. Without daily reinforcement, effort remained fragile, easily disrupted by minor inconvenience. As the first year ended, the difference between them was no longer subtle. Even the other students noticed. Takahashi moved with a calm confidence that did not seek attention. He spoke less than ever, but when he did, his words were measured. Kenta still spoke passionately, still planned ambitious futures, but his voice now carried a faint edge of defensiveness, as if he sensed something slipping beyond reach. Deep inside, Kenta felt the truth pressing against him. He knew, though he rarely admitted it, that something was wrong. Not with his intelligence, not with his desire, but with his consistency. The truth was sharp, uncomfortable, and demanded sacrifice. So he avoided it. Avoidance did not feel like failure. It felt like waiting. Waiting, however, does not pause time. It allows it to pass unchallenged. While Kenta waited for the perfect moment, Takahashi accumulated thousands of imperfect ones. Each repetition was insignificant alone, but together they built something unmovable. By the end of that year, Takahashi had stopped thinking about becoming a warrior. He was becoming one without thinking. Kenta was still preparing to begin. And in that difference, quiet, uncelebrated, and irreversible, the shape of their futures was already set. One evening, as winter tightened its grip on the village, Yamamoto-sensei summoned Takahashi alone. The dojo was silent except for the low hiss of a single oil lamp. The boy knelt, spine straight, eyes lowered, waiting. The teacher studied him for a long moment, as if weighing something invisible. "Why do you come every day?" he finally asked. The question was simple, almost casual, yet it carried the weight of judgment. Takahashi hesitated, not from fear, but from unfamiliarity. No one had ever asked him to justify what felt natural. "Because you told us to come," he answered. Yamamoto-sensei did not react. "And when it is cold?" "I come." "When your body aches?" "I come." "When you do not want to?" Takahashi paused, searching for language that could hold something instinctive. "Because today is today," he said at last. Tomorrow is not here. The teacher closed his eyes. In that moment, he understood that this boy had crossed an invisible threshold. Discipline had ceased to be an effort and had become an identity. Later that same night, Yamamoto-sensei called Kenta. The boy entered with energy, already rehearsing explanations. The teacher did not ask many questions. He asked only one. Why do you not come every day? Kenta's answer spilled out immediately: responsibilities, fatigue, family needs, circumstances beyond control. Each reason was reasonable. Each was true. The teacher listened without interruption, then raised a hand. Silence settled between them. There is a word, Yamamoto-sensei said slowly, that destroys more warriors than any blade. That word is tomorrow. Kenta frowned, confused. Tomorrow is hope, the teacher continued. It promises effort without cost. It allows you to feel committed without acting. But a warrior does not live in tomorrow. He lives in now. Tomorrow is a beautiful lie, because it never arrives. When you say tomorrow, you are choosing not to act today. The word struck deeper than Kenta expected. He felt exposed, as if something private had been named aloud. Yamamoto-sensei leaned forward slightly. A warrior may die at any moment. He cannot delay his discipline. He trains today because today is all that exists. Not when it is convenient. Not when he feels ready. But now. Kenta nodded, absorbing the message intellectually, yet something in him resisted. Understanding did not immediately translate into obedience. That night, Kenta lay awake, the teacher's words echoing through his mind. He counted the times he had postponed effort, the mornings he had traded discomfort for sleep, the evenings he had chosen intention over action. The realization was painful, but pain alone does not guarantee change. As exhaustion finally overtook him, one familiar thought crept back in, soft and reassuring. Tomorrow, he would be different. Tomorrow, he would begin. And with that thought, comforting and fatal, the cycle quietly prepared to repeat itself. The following year exposed the consequences of those quiet choices with brutal clarity. What had once been a subtle divergence became undeniable. Takahashi's presence in the dojo carried a gravity that others felt instinctively. His movements were no longer corrected by the teacher. His strikes landed with precision, his breathing remained steady even under strain, and his eyes stayed calm where others tensed. He did not rush. He did not hesitate. The body remembered what the mind no longer needed to command. Kenta, meanwhile, lived in oscillation. Weeks of renewed effort would be followed by lapses that erased momentum. Each restart felt harder than the last. Discipline, when interrupted, demands a toll for re-entry, and Kenta paid it repeatedly. He trained often enough to believe he was progressing, but not enough to make progress inevitable. His identity became fragmented, sometimes disciplined, sometimes not, never stable long enough to compound. The day of the daimyo's inspection arrived under clear skies. The courtyard filled with tension as the feudal lord observed the young warriors. He spoke little, watched everything, and missed nothing. When he finally announced his decision, silence tightened like a drawn bow. Names were called, one by one, measured and final. Takahashi stepped forward without expression. He knelt. The daimyo nodded. Recognition passed without ceremony. Kenta waited, confidence flickering into doubt with each name spoken. When the final name was called and it was not his, the realization settled slowly, like cold. He stood among those left behind, watching Takahashi receive a new uniform, watching pride bloom in faces that once looked the same at him. In that moment, Kenta felt something unfamiliar and corrosive take root. Envy. That evening, alone with his thoughts, Kenta dissected the outcome. He listed his strengths, his intelligence, his understanding of theory, his passion. None of it explained the result. The truth hovered close, sharp and unbearable. Takahashi had shown up every day. Not brilliantly. Not heroically. Relentlessly. Kenta had not. The mind, when cornered by truth, seeks refuge in explanation. Kenta found it in injustice. Favoritism. Luck. Unequal circumstances. These ideas dulled the sting and allowed him to sleep. They also marked the beginning of something dangerous. Resentment replaced responsibility. When Takahashi approached him the next day, eyes still calm, voice unchanged, Kenta's congratulations came out strained. "You can do it too," Takahashi said simply. "Just train every day." The words were not boastful. They were factual. But Kenta heard accusation where none was intended. His defenses rose immediately. "It's easier for you," he replied. "You don't have as many obligations." Takahashi looked at him for a long moment. "I do," he said quietly. "I just wake up earlier." There was no anger in his voice, only sadness. And in that sadness lay a truth Kenta could no longer escape, even as he turned away from it. From that moment on, distance grew where friendship once lived. Kenta began avoiding Takahashi, not out of hatred, but out of discomfort. Takahashi had become a mirror, and Kenta did not like what it reflected. When others spoke of Takahashi's discipline, Kenta changed the subject. When praise became unavoidable, he diluted it with explanations. "Anyone could do it with that much time," he would say, as if time were something Takahashi possessed and he did not. 5 years passed. Time, relentless and impartial, completed what daily choices had begun. Takahashi returned from advanced training no longer a student but a warrior. His presence was quiet, authoritative, undeniable. Scars traced his skin like punctuation marks in a long sentence of survival. He spoke even less than before, but when he did, people listened. He had learned not only how to fight, but how to endure. Kenta had not changed. His body bore no record of sacrifice. His reputation was fixed. Intelligent, articulate, unreliable. The kind of man trusted with ideas but not with outcomes. When war came and the daimyo called for 20 men, only those whose discipline was unquestioned were chosen. Takahashi's name was spoken first. Kenta's was not spoken at all. As Takahashi bowed and accepted a real sword, Kenta felt something rupture inside him. This was not envy anymore. It was shame. Not the fleeting embarrassment of failure, but the heavy, undeniable awareness of being seen clearly. He was not rejected because he lacked talent. He was rejected because he could not be trusted to act when it mattered. That night, Kenta sat alone, the weight of years pressing down on him. For the first time, he did not reach for comfort in excuses. He saw the pattern in full. Every delay. Every promise postponed. Every time he had chosen ease over effort. The realization was merciless, but it was also honest. He stood at a crossroads. One path led through pain, discipline, and humility. The other led through justification, bitterness, and slow decay. One demanded action now. The other offered the familiar shelter of tomorrow. If Kenta chose change, the beginning was brutal. He woke before dawn, not because he wanted to, but because he decided to. His body resisted. His mind screamed. He trained only 10 minutes the first day. The second day was worse. The third day nearly broke him. But he continued. And something unexpected happened. Control replaced chaos. For the first time, he governed himself. If he chose avoidance, the decline was quieter but just as final. Each delay strengthened the habit of waiting. Each excuse hardened into belief. Envy fermented into resentment. The years passed, and his story remained unwritten, always postponed. Both futures began in the same place. A single morning. A single decision. Not tomorrow. Today. Decades later, the consequences of those early choices stood fully formed. Takahashi, now a seasoned warrior, carried the marks of battle not as trophies but as quiet reminders. Gray threaded through his hair, and his movements, though slower, remained precise. Young warriors gathered around him, eager for instruction. When they asked about talent or destiny, he dismissed the ideas gently. "I was not special," he told them. "I just showed up every day." His lessons were simple, almost disappointingly so. Rise when you do not want to. Act before your mind negotiates. Do the work while others wait for the perfect moment. If Kenta chose discipline, he stood beside Takahashi as an equal. The years of relentless effort had carved strength into him as surely as they had into his friend. The bitterness had dissolved, replaced by respect, for Takahashi, and for himself. They spoke little of the past. They did not need to. The silence between them was earned, not awkward. Two men shaped by different beginnings but the same ending, responsibility accepted, excuses abandoned. If Kenta chose avoidance, his life unfolded differently. He became a man heavy with explanations and light on achievements. His stories grew longer as his accomplishments shrank. He told anyone who would listen how close he had come, how circumstances had interfered, how fate had been unfair. Younger men learned quickly to nod politely and keep their distance. They sensed the warning embedded in his presence. Potential wasted is louder than failure. When Takahashi returned from war as a hero, Kenta watched from the edge of the crowd, unable to approach. Respect surrounded his former friend like armor. Shame rooted Kenta in place. Yet even then, the final admission eluded him. He chose comfort again. He chose the lie that protected his pride. And with that choice, the distance became permanent. 30 years after their first morning in the dojo, the story of two boys became legend in the province. Elders told it not to glorify warriors, but to warn dreamers. They spoke of how nothing separates lives more decisively than daily action. Not talent. Not intelligence. Not opportunity. Action, repeated or avoided. Kenta, in his old age, still spoke of tomorrow. His voice weakened, but the phrase remained. If only I had started earlier. Takahashi, when asked about success, simply returned to training. Even at an age when others rested, he practiced small movements, careful breathing, steady focus. Discipline had outlived ambition. Their lives became a living answer to the same question posed to every generation. Not who you want to be. Not what you intend. But what you do today. Because today, repeated long enough, becomes destiny. Decades later, the consequences of those early choices stood fully formed. Takahashi, now a seasoned warrior, carried the marks of battle not as trophies but as quiet reminders. Gray threaded through his hair, and his movements, though slower, remained precise. Young warriors gathered around him, eager for instruction. When they asked about talent or destiny, he dismissed the ideas gently. "I was not special," he told them. "I just showed up every day." His lessons were simple, almost disappointingly so. Rise when you do not want to. Act before your mind negotiates. Do the work while others wait for the perfect moment. If Kenta chose discipline, he stood beside Takahashi as an equal. The years of relentless effort had carved strength into him as surely as they had into his friend. The bitterness had dissolved, replaced by respect, for Takahashi, and for himself. They spoke little of the past. They did not need to. The silence between them was earned, not awkward. Two men shaped by different beginnings but the same ending, responsibility accepted, excuses abandoned. If Kenta chose avoidance, his life unfolded differently. He became a man heavy with explanations and light on achievements. His stories grew longer as his accomplishments shrank. He told anyone who would listen how close he had come, how circumstances had interfered, how fate had been unfair. Younger men learned quickly to nod politely and keep their distance. They sensed the warning embedded in his presence. Potential wasted is louder than failure. When Takahashi returned from war as a hero, Kenta watched from the edge of the crowd, unable to approach. Respect surrounded his former friend like armor. Shame rooted Kenta in place. Yet even then, the final admission eluded him. He chose comfort again. He chose the lie that protected his pride. And with that choice, the distance became permanent. 30 years after their first morning in the dojo, the story of two boys became legend in the province. Elders told it not to glorify warriors, but to warn dreamers. They spoke of how nothing separates lives more decisively than daily action. Not talent. Not intelligence. Not opportunity. Action, repeated or avoided. Kenta, in his old age, still spoke of tomorrow. His voice weakened, but the phrase remained. If only I had started earlier. Takahashi, when asked about success, simply returned to training. Even at an age when others rested, he practiced small movements, careful breathing, steady focus. Discipline had outlived ambition. Their lives became a living answer to the same question posed to every generation. Not who you want to be. Not what you intend. But what you do today. Because today, repeated long enough, becomes destiny. The story of Kenta and Takahashi did not end with them. It never does. It repeats itself quietly in every generation, in different places, under different names. Not in mountain dojos or with wooden swords, but in offices, homes, gyms, classrooms, and empty early mornings. The setting changes. The choice does not. As 2026 approaches, more people than ever will stand at the same invisible crossroads, believing the world has changed enough that discipline no longer matters. They will be wrong. Most people will not fail in 2026 because they lack intelligence. They will not fail because they lack access, resources, or opportunity. They will fail because they keep choosing tomorrow. They will wait for motivation. They will wait for clarity. They will wait for the right time, the right mood, the right circumstances. And while they wait, time will move forward without them. Progress will quietly reward those who acted without permission from comfort. The world ahead will not be forgiving. Distraction will be louder. Competition will be sharper. Comfort will be easier to access and harder to escape. The gap between those who act daily and those who delay will widen faster than ever before. In such a world, discipline is no longer an advantage. It is survival. The ability to do what must be done without negotiation will separate the stable from the fragile, the creators from the consumers, the leaders from the observers. Those who succeed will not look extraordinary from the outside. They will not always speak confidently or announce their plans. Like Takahashi, they will simply show up. On days when energy is low. On days when no one is watching. On days when quitting would be justified. They will build lives the same way mountains are built, slowly, quietly, relentlessly. Those who fail will have reasons. Convincing ones. Logical ones. They will explain themselves beautifully. They will tell stories about potential and unfair timing. They will believe, sincerely, that one day things will change. But days do not change people. Actions do. The final lesson is simple, and that is why it is ignored. You are not defined by what you plan to do, but by what you repeat. Your future is not shaped by one dramatic decision, but by thousands of small ones made when no one is forcing you. Every morning asks the same question. Rise or delay? Act or explain? Today or tomorrow? 2026 will not decide who you become. You will decide long before it arrives. And the choice will not be made in a single moment of inspiration. It will be made quietly, repeatedly, in ordinary moments that feel insignificant. But nothing is more significant than the direction you choose when comfort and discipline stand in front of you. The path is open. It always has been. The only question left is whether you step onto it today, or promise yourself that you will tomorrow.